phone lines this morning, Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder. Good morning, Sheriff.
Good morning, Scott. How are you today?
Great. Here's a snippet yesterday from your press conference.
On the evening of November 6, 1973, a young Billings Heights couple was murdered in their home. Clifford Bernhardt, a decorated Vietnam Army veteran, was employed by Quality Concrete. His wife, Linda, worked for Ryan's Incorporated. We have determined that Cecil Stan Caldwell, a former co-worker of Linda Bernhardt, is the person responsible for the deaths of Linda and Clifford Bernhardt.
This cold case has been sitting out there since 1973. This is probably one of the top priorities with this one unit, is to get this one crime solved. That was all the way back in 1973. Bring us up to date on how the investigation, when it started, to when you guys said, yeah, this is a gentleman that did this crime.
Well, Scott, when we started our cold case unit back in 2012, we looked at the 9 cases, actually 13 actual homicides, because we had the 2 doubles there, and we kind of prioritized them. We had a large group of people. I named them the other day or yesterday during our conference, but retired detectives. We had federal investigators. We just had a myriad of people. And we looked at what we could do on each of these, or what we may not be able to do. Excuse me. And so after a couple of years, the core group started working on these a little bit harder, and we decided that the Bernhardt one really could be solved. And Lieutenant Ron Wilson, who is no longer with us, started watching the what could be done with DNA. And we knew that we had a lot of evidence that was collected from the scene. And I think it was in 2004 he sent a pair of pants in that belonged to Linda, and they were able to extract DNA from a stain on those pants. And that's when we really had something to work with. There was really nothing else left at the scene that gave us any ideas or thoughts of who it might be. So when we entered that information into CODIS, the FBI database, we found nothing. I mean, we suspected maybe that we'd get a hit on somebody, or maybe if it had been a random act, criminal in the neighborhood or something. But we really got nothing, and it took all the way till 2015 when we hired Parabon to do this phenotyping, this snapshot they called it, and that's when we got at least the ethnicity, the eye color, the skin complex, just all these different details that came into play here. And that allowed us to eliminate a lot of people. I mean, we eliminated 80, I believe it was 80 just through the DNA process, using the crime lab and a private lab as well. And then we were able to go through the rest of these case files, because there was over 100 people that were listed as people of interest. We went through the case files. We took out a lot of those that really didn't meet the criteria on this snapshot. Those were not, they weren't set aside, but they were kind of put towards the bottom of the list. And then when Parabon came out with this genealogy and the ability to recreate the family tree, kind of doing it in reverse order, and come up with the surnames of people that kind of matched this DNA, or that had a connection through DNA, then we started checking those and putting those towards the front. And when we came up with that information, we submitted what we had, and the DNA profiles Parabon did to GEDmatch, which was able to come up with the 2 names, basically, that we really should be looking at. So we got some help from an agency out of state to contact the one living relative who cooperated, provided a DNA sample, which was then sent to our state crime lab, who already had the profile from the crime scene, and they were able to tell us that it was not the living relative. That obviously, through the process of elimination, left only Cecil Caldwell as the actual suspect, and that's when we knew we had our man.
Now, Cecil passed away in December 2003, correct?
Correct.
So, this brings so much closure to the family. The family was there yesterday, and they just asked the press for a little time, just for them just to kind of let it all sink in. I took a picture of, I think it was about an 8-foot table that you guys had in the other room, where you had the files and the binders and everything of all the information that you guys had collected over the years. There must have been just a ton of people that were involved with this investigation.
Oh, there were over, I believe Scott said, over 800 contacts between witnesses, people of interest, law enforcement agencies, and it was just time-consuming. Those files, those manila files that were there, are all the people, or many of the people that were contacted. A lot of them were people of interest, and those binders that you saw there, them 3 or 4 inch binders, those are full of the actual reports, the ones that the deputies did, the ones that we got back from the crime lab and from other agencies as well. And so all of that information there is what it takes to solve one of these cases. And, again, and I mentioned it yesterday, going back to the original investigators, and we had a couple of them at the press conference yesterday, that had they not felt it was necessary to collect some of the items that they did, and we had more than one source of DNA, so it wasn't just like this one stain on the pants. Again, we told people we're not releasing everything, we're not showing all our cards on this, but that was kind of I guess the main point that we were trying to make was the DNA was what made this case for us.
One of the big questions that probably will never be answered is why.
Yeah, and there's a lot of speculation. Even the FBI profilers that we brought on board a few years back, very, very experienced FBI profilers, they were the ones saying that it was probably an infatuation with Linda by the suspect, probably somebody they knew. Obviously, that was the case. Linda did, in fact, work with Caldwell at Ryan's for a period of time, but we don't know why. Had he been invited over? We're not sure. Did he just show up? There was no signs of forced entry. So I guess we can make some assumptions. Everybody kind of comes to their own conclusions. But one thing I will say is when we spoke to the family yesterday morning, we met for about an hour and a half, and again it got pretty emotional. Most of them, I believe, were well aware that we had made this discovery that the DNA was going to come up with a suspect. We just weren't sure when, and we didn't have a name yet for them, and they didn't hear the name until yesterday. So that's why it's probably more emotional, just not knowing all this time. But we had to be sure as well. We had to do a little bit more testing even after we had told them that we were pretty sure we had it. And and every day and every week that it took after that to release the name, that I think that was just really a relief for the family yesterday.
So was Mr. Caldwell, was he ever talked to about this?
Well, we're not sure. His name was in the case file, but there was no report indicating anybody actually spoke to him. I believe there was over 100 employees there at Ryan's where they worked. And it's common practice to talk to all the coworkers and stuff. That there just was not a report, or if there was, we didn't see it. Might have been something short, but back then, if it was it would have been probably a large cassette type recording. That if they took a tape statement, or if they interviewed him and showed that, or decided that he had no real link to this, because there really was no evidence to link anybody to it at the time. Maybe they just dismissed him as a possible suspect.
This new system, this new way that you found out who the murderer of this couple was, are you going to be using that on other cold cases?
Well, we're going to take a look at all of these cold cases to see what we have as far as evidence, and we'll be in touch with the company to see if if there is a reality in using the same type of technology. This was so new for us, just in the last couple of years that this came along. In fact, I think the the genealogy portion of it started after they gave us that snapshot, so that's probably about a year ago. And so we'll actually take a look at everything, see what we have for DNA evidence in any of these crimes. In some of them, there just was no DNA, so whether or not it'll help us in another way. But even when we look at it, back in 1973, nobody had any idea that those items that they saved, and A.G. Fox at the conference yesterday made it a point of that too, that not knowing how, if any, importance there is to these items that they collected, how would anybody ever think that 45 years later that was critical to solving this case?
Now, this genealogy, it went all the way back to, 1832, something like that?
1832, yes, and you can imagine how many people in that bloodline would be included in that. I think C.C. Moore, who we were very privileged to have join us there on Skype and explain how that worked and basically her role, she took a personal interest in this, stayed in touch with us. We spoke to her, and they had no idea who this family was, who the people were involved, and we met with them on a Skype call about a month and a half ago, I believe it was, and they gave us this information, and as far as a possible name, and they asked us, does this ring any bells? Does it have any connection to this case? And when Scott Goodwin, one of our volunteers, said that person worked with Linda, there was really just, like I say, an audible gasp come across the television there where we were having our conference, and they just, it was amazing. That's when I think we really thought that this is where we are. We've got this now. We just need to do some follow-up. They gave us our marching orders on the follow-up that we needed to do. Our unit jumped on it, got things done, and we are where we are now.
Well, thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Absolutely, Scott. You have a good day.
Yellowstone County Sheriff Mike Linder this morning on News Talk 730 KYYA.